We are back on the record at 10:34 a.m. This is the beginning of Media Unit number 2.
Okay, you ready to continue?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to hand you this document first. I'm going to hand a copy to the opposing counsel, and then I guess I'll give, if you can mark this one when you're ready.
Is it going to be long?
Just one, yeah.
See if there's a stapler back anywhere in like one of those little. If not, no big deal. Otherwise, I have.
I brought something for this purpose, which was this box right here. That's what I brought.
So I don't lose.
That's where I brought them.
Paper. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Have you seen this document before?
Sure, yes.
Okay. And can you tell us what it is?
It's a police report regarding suspicious circumstances that the school district filed in relation to the Abbott situation.
Okay. And when you say the school district, who on behalf of the school district filed this?
Means.
And that's you?
That's me.
Okay. So, and you filed this, and to be clear, after there was a vote by the school board?
I don't recall if it was a vote or not. I know we discussed it in closed session. I remember it vividly. We met and came out of that closed session where a school board member actually wrote a statement that the school board president wrote or read into the record, and then I think another board member did. I don't remember if there was an official vote, but I know that there was uniformed agreement that this would be the direction.
Okay. And I'm just going to read from that here. This is the second paragraph. It says, in November of 2021, I became aware of a potential public integrity issue involving the Wauwatosa School District. Is that you speaking there?
Well, it can't be me if it's a police report from the Wauwatosa Police Department. I work for the school district.
Okay. Thank you for that. So then moving on, it says, on about 11/17 of 21, there was a news story released by Amanda St. Hilaire of Fox 6. Did I read that part right?
You did.
Okay. Do you know who Amanda St. Hilaire is?
She's a reporter for Fox 6 News.
Has she ever made any public records request to you?
She has made a request to the Wauwatosa School District.
Okay, thank you. And did she made a request to the school district regarding the Avid situation?
She has.
Okay. So it says, titled Fox 6 Investigates, School Administrator Encouraged Academic Program That Paid Her Husband. Did I read that headline right?
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
I'm going to object to the form.
Okay.
Are you asking him if that's what the document says, or that he agrees that the title of that news account is a fair assessment of the situation?
The latter. So I'll just rephrase that question here. Do you think that the statement, school administrator encouraged academic program that paid her husband, is accurate?
I'm going to object to the form. Calls for an opinion. Subject to that, you may answer.
I've been counseled to provide facts and not opinions, and I think this would be an opinion. So I will respectfully decline the opportunity to answer your question.
Okay, but based on your knowledge and experience as a superintendent, do you believe that that's a factually accurate statement?
Same objection, but you can answer subject to that.
I think that was a skillful way of asking the question a different way, but I will, again, respectfully decline to offer opinion.
Okay, and I have to ask this then. Are you refusing to answer that question?
No, I'm not. I think the question is broad and is requesting an opinion, and this is supposed to be a factual, exploratory event.
Okay, and based on the facts known to you at that time, is Kristen Bauer, was she a school administrator?
She was our assistant superintendent.
Okay, and do you believe that Kristen Bowers encouraged academic program that encouraged AVID that paid her husband?
I'm going to object to form foundation. Subject to that, you may answer.
I think the way you phrased that question, I can answer.
Great.
The school district approved AVID. Kristen Bowers didn't approve AVID. The school board voted to bring AVID into the school district. There was a superintendent that was involved. So if you think about how a school district works, Kristen Bowers did not work unilaterally and independently to bring in AVID by herself. That's not accurate.
Okay, but it is true that AVID paid her husband?
And again, I'm going to object on foundation grounds. Subject to that, if you know, please answer.
I don't know how much of the contract and I would have to go back into this investigation again. The form of that question is really broad in that if you're using the very broadest terms of did the Wauwatosa School District pay AVID and subsequently as an employee of AVID was Mr. Bowers compensated? Sure. How much of that dollar amount that the Wauwatosa School District paid AVID that then went to Brett Bowers? I think this investigation showed that it was really difficult to try to track that trail.
Also it says that the school board approved a 3-year contract with AVID for $170,539. Is that statement true?
Yes, that is true. The school board, I think it may have been a unanimous vote.
Okay, and that's in February, so you would not have been the superintendent at that time?
Not at all.
Okay, and that was Mr. Ertl, correct?
That was Dr. Ertl.
Dr. Ertl, thank you. Okay, and then it says the contract was awarded without the process of competitive bids. Is that true?
And again, I'm just going to object on foundation grounds because it happened before you were there. But if you know from your work, then please answer his question.
I believe that is accurate.
Okay, and just to be clear, so we're clear on the foundation here, there was an investigation into this by the school board, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and have you seen the results of that investigation, if any?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have. I've seen it.
And you've read it?
I have.
In its entirety? Mm-hmm. Okay. So,
yes, that's yes. Sorry.
So based on that knowledge, is this statement accurate?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The contract was awarded, the AVID contract was awarded without the process of competitive bids.
Again, object on foundation grounds. If you know, please answer.
I will object on foundation.
Well, you can't object.
Oh.
I am. But you should answer his question unless you don't know. If you don't know, you can tell him, I don't know.
I was not the superintendent at the time, Mr. Cross, when this contract was awarded, nor was I there during the process of gaining the contract. So it's really, yes, I may have read the reports, but I was not part of the actual process of securing the contracts, nor was I the administrator that led the board in approving the contract.
Sure, I'll keep all that in mind, but just focusing on, based on your knowledge of the report, the investigative report.
My knowledge is that, yes, there was no RFP process that was associated, request for proposal process, associated with this securing of these services.
Okay, and did you know that fact before you read that investigative report?
I believe I did.
How did you come to know that?
Through my investigation and my review of documents.
When did that occur?
When I started getting open records requests and there was acrimony in the community around AVID.
Okay. So, and we're clear at least that there's at least one Fox 6 News public records request for AVID, correct?
There's at least one, but I believe there are more.
Okay. And then did I also understand your previous answer to mean that there was also public records requests by people who weren't Fox 6 News regarding AVID?
Yes.
Okay. And were those from members of the community or something else?
Members of the community.
Okay. Did you know any of the people who made those requests personally?
Yes.
Okay. Did any board members make any requests?
I don't recall, no.
How about former board members?
I don't put people in the category of board members or non-board members or former board members. There was a community member who I am aware of who is also a former board member who made a request around Abbott.
Okay.
A citizen.
Okay. Then going on, it says the Avid contract had already been signed by Phil Ertl prior to the board's vote. Is that information correct based on your understanding?
Based on my understanding, yes.
Okay. And did you know that prior to reading that the investigative report?
Yes.
Okay. And it goes on to say, Assistant Superintendent Kristen Bowers worked in the department. And sorry, I want to focus on that title, Assistant Superintendent. Does the district have more than one Assistant Superintendent?
That was the organizational framework that Dr. Ertl had. He used the terminology or used the titles of Assistant Superintendent.
Does the district have an Assistant Superintendent today?
No.
Okay. Do you have anybody that assists you directly?
I'm going to object to the form of that, but
I have a
subject to-
cabinet. I have a district leadership team. I think that when the term assistant superintendent means that they're the number two
Right.
for their individual departments or areas of concentration. Dr. Ertl had, I believe, 3 assistant superintendents.
Okay.
He had one in human resources, one in academic support or academic services, and one in business services.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, that clears that up. So, so Assistant Superintendent Kristen Bowers worked in the department that recommended and would manage the AVID program. What department are we talking about there?
That's the academic side of the curriculum and instruction team.
Okay, I got it. And so that's why AVID is essentially providing curriculum, correct? I mean, curriculum
Yes, sir.
packages.
It provides a number of different services. It provides professional learning. It provides curricular materials. It's a very unique system. The Avid people will say that they don't call it a curriculum. They call it more of a system of services.
Okay, but one of those things you're purchasing is a curriculum, correct?
There are curricular components to it. Curricular materials, yes.
Okay, but not an entire package as a curriculum itself.
Well, it depends on how you define curriculum. There are lessons that are provided by Avid. There are instructional materials that they provide, but they don't, it's not like buying a set of textbooks.
No, and I mean, I think we're both clear on the curriculum is much more than textbooks, right?
Right.
Okay. So, but we also are clear, I think, that there are state standards regarding curriculum and that each district must follow, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the ways a district can follow that is to buy pre-programmed, pre-packaged materials from different vendors, correct?
Yes.
And Avid's is one of those vendors?
Avid doesn't meet any academic state standards. There's no state standards that are met through Avid.
Okay. What, to your knowledge, what did the district get for its $170,000?
A great deal of it was professional learning.
What does that mean?
What it means is that there were a number of teachers who were traveling to different areas of the country for professional learning conferences, if you will.
Okay.
On how to implement their curriculum and their materials. A vast majority of the dollars associated with Avid is associated with professional learning.
Okay.
They have something called a summer institute, and that summer institute is where you send teachers and they learn how to implement Avid.
Okay. And what benefit, if any, did the district obtain from that?
I'm going to object. That's a very broad question. Subject to that, give it a go.
Some would argue, I mean, because that's a pretty broad question. I understand. So you're asking for an opinion. I won't give an opinion. I will just give you a very general perspective of professional learning for teachers is always valuable. And when you have time and professional learning to assist teachers in learning how to implement curriculum, it makes the implementation that much more seamless.
Okay. And was Miss Bowers in any way working on the Avid contract?
I don't. Prior to my arrival, I have no idea.
Okay. After your arrival, did you have any idea?
I know that there was one call that she was on with a number of other staff members in the district regarding next steps with Avid. I'm framing it this way because when you go back to that opinion letter, then you have to compare if that opinion letter provided her the ability to even be part of any discussions with Avid.
Okay, so let's look at that letter. And that letter was presented to the public ultimately, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And so I'm going to go here to what looks as the third page. And at the top there, it's going to say on 8/16/19. Did you see that, sir?
No. Oh, okay, right here? Sure.
Thank you very much. Okay. So it says on 8/16/19, Erdl, I assume that's Superintendent Erdl, received a legal opinion from attorney Lana Leffler at Bulow, Vetter, Bukima, Olson, and Valite LLC regarding the potential conflict of interest. The letter stated, in summary, it is our opinion that there is a potential conflict of interest and appearance of impropriety. To avoid a potential violation of Wisconsin's Ethics Code, Wisconsin's Criminal Code, and Board Policy 1130, we would recommend that Ms. Bowers not be involved in any action or decision-making related to any future contracts between the district and Avid. Did I read that part right?
Yes.
Okay. And you had knowledge of that letter, or when did you read that letter?
Boy, I don't know. August, September. As soon as the Avid open records request started to come in, so early in my tenure.
Okay, so the open records request preceded the legal opinion letter?
The opinion letter preceded the open records request.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Now, based on your understanding of this letter and your understanding of the investigation, what action, if any, did the district take in response to this letter by Ilana Leffler?
I don't think any official action was taken.
Okay, and how do you know that?
I don't. I mean, there was not. You're asking me to reference or to speak to issues that were in place prior to my arrival, and so I can't really address them. There was no documentation or any memorandums that were issued as a result of the opinion letter.
Okay. And I'm sorry, can you remind me when you became the superintendent?
July of 2021.
Okay. So when it says on July 6th, 5 days after Kristen Bowers became the assistant superintendent, were you the superintendent at that time?
I started in July of 2021.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. Okay. And then it says you discussed this payment that happened the year before with Mr. Erdl. Is that right? Dr. Erdl.
In speaking with the police, I've referenced two different, I've referenced policies. I've referenced there's a policy, it's 6320, and it required the board approval of any items over $20,000.
Okay.
And then I also referenced the curriculum development policy of 2210 that talks about the process of having some type of audit and presentation to the board prior to moving forward with the solidifying or approving a curriculum. So those two policies were discussed with the police.
Okay. And that's the conflict of interest policy?
There's not a conflict of interest. I think the two policies, Mr. Cross, were brought up 6320 because, so the two policies that were discussed were 6320, which is the purchasing policy. And that states that any item over $20,000 requires board approval. The second policy was 2210, which is the curriculum development policy, which states that there should be some level of a presentation to the board prior to the adoption of a curriculum. Those two policies were discussed with the police because they would have served as firewalls, if you will, on the concern of Abbott in the purchasing of services.
I understand. Okay. This is going to be our 2, please.
Okay.
This is for this.
I'm going to make a recommendation. Keep this.
Okay.
There we go.
Have you seen this document before?
Yes.
What is this?
The document that you're referencing is policy 1130, which is cited as conflict of interest, private practice.
Okay. And where does this policy come from, if you know?
It's district policy.
Okay.
It's Wauwatosa School District policy.
And that's one of your jobs as the superintendent, is to enforce the policy, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and based on your understanding as superintendent, is this the current policy?
It's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and it would have been in play both when you started as superintendent and previous to that?
I'm going to object to the form as to the part of that question for previous to his employment on foundation grounds. Subject to that, you may answer.
On the bottom of the document, Mr. Cross, it says it was adopted in July 13 of 2009.
So that, so if we can assume that this is valid through July 13th of 2009 to the present, then we can assume that it's...
It became valid on July 13th, 2009.
I appreciate all those clarity. Okay. So now that we're clear that this is the policy here, can you look at the section B under this policy?
Yes, it states
Hold
employees...
on, he's not asking you to read it.
Please do, please do.
You want him to read it
He-
into the record?
Please.
Okay, go ahead.
Employees shall not engage in business, private practice of their profession, the rendering of services, or the sale of goods of any type, where advantage is taken of any professional relationship that may have with any student, client, or parents of such students or clients in the course of their employment with the school district.
Okay, and do you feel that this policy, that paragraph was violated?
I'm going to object to the form vague.
By Miss Erdl at that time.
You mean Mrs. Bowers?
I'm sorry, thank you, yeah.
I'm going to object to the form vague. You may answer subject to that.
Feels like an opinion question. If you don't mind, I'll respectfully decline to answer that
But
one.
you're the superintendent, right?
I am.
Okay, and so and part of your job is to enforce these policies, right?
It is.
And so in order to force these policies, you have to at least be able to form an opinion as to whether or not somebody's violated the policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's look here at Section A. It says no employee shall engage in or have a financial interest directly or indirectly. Did I read that part?
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe that Ms. Bowers had a indirect or direct financial interest in Avid?
In a very broad way, you can make that argument that once the school board approved Abbott, everyone blew past, everyone, the board, administration, everyone prior to July of 2021 blew past policy 1130 subsection A.
Okay.
And so you've referenced, but you are the superintendent, upon the Board of Education approving Avid, that was all of that was kind of put to the side in terms of if people were going to reference 1130 subsection A, that was the time to mention it.
And do you believe the board was aware of this issue prior to making that decision?
This issue being the board policy, or this object to the form vague? I think it can be fixed.
I appreciate that. So let's.
Well, so I want to answer that part.
Well, let him get a question out so we have a nice order. He's going to fix it. Just
Right.
one thing.
So what I want to be clear is there's you had, I guess we want to be clear, prior to the investigation, you had knowledge of what the board was doing, right?
I'm going to object to the form of that.
What do you mean?
Vague.
What,
Fine. You had knowledge of the board's, you had discussions with the board about Avid prior to November of that year, right?
I had discussions about the open record request and the concerns about Avid as when I arrived.
Okay. Okay. And based on that, did you have, do you believe that the board had knowledge of those concerns about Avid prior to voting to investigate Avid?
I'm going to object to the form. It's vague and foundation. Subject to that. If you can't answer, please.
I don't think I can answer the question because A, I don't understand it totally, and B, it's really broad.
Okay. But based, you had the part of what we're trying to establish for foundation purposes is that you had discussions with the board in terms of what the problems were with Avid, right?
Go ahead.
I think starting in November, there were, when you used the word the board, we had closed session meetings around the open records request and the news story that was being done about Avid.
Okay.
So that's where, when you say the board, that you're speaking of all 7 board members. Individually, I don't know if every board member, when I talked to them individually, had concerns around the system Avid at all.
Okay, but based on any of those discussions, do you believe that prior to voting for the Avid contract, of the $170,000 Avid contract, the board was aware of the issues, alleged or otherwise, with Kristen Bowers?
I'm going to object to the form and foundation. Subject to that, you may answer.
And this is what I wanted to bring it back to our first session. And this is how my superintendency has been truly adverse, or has been affected in an adverse way. So there is now this film of needing to know more information than my predecessor ever provided.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Mr. Cross? So there was an opinion letter that was issued to the district in 2019. The board voted on this in 2020. And so what has happened subsequently is that now there's this heightened watchdog approach to working with the superintendent, maybe because things weren't being watched as closely as they should have with my predecessor. And it has adversely impacted my superintendency. It has greatly and adversely impacted how I have to do my work. Because if we're tracking, if we're going to track in terms of what's happening here, if you really want to go checks and balances, there was an opinion letter that was provided to the school district in 2019. The school board voted on a $170,000 contract in 2020. So if we're going to talk brass tacks, then the watchdog impact that has been affecting our school system is adversely impacting me.
Okay.
Right? And so now the threshold and the levels that I'm being held to, is it a result of what didn't happen prior to my arrival? That's the question I have.
Okay.
And and so then, and this is where I'm gonna stop here at this point, because I know my attorney will tell me to stop at this point, but this is where I have a lot of different and additional questions as to why is this threshold of accountability and information being bestowed on me, and it wasn't bestowed prior. It wasn't bestowed prior, because if that was the case, the opinion letter from 2019 would have impacted, because you're the one that you pointed out policy 1130 in the conflict of interest. The school board voted on this $170,000 contract in 2020. Okay. Yes, sir.
And
thank you for that opportunity.
I appreciate that, because I think it's given me an opportunity to be clear here. Because let's put it like this: I think I was saying that you're the one who's in control of whether or not an issue goes to is a day-to-day issue or a policy issue, and that might not be correct. So I want to be clear on that. Are you? Is there sometimes when the school board decides whether or not it's going to address something as a policy issue that might ordinarily be a day-to-day issue?
I think that's a great question. I think the school board, in retrospect, when they look back on how they have governed with my predecessor and now how they want to govern with me, they have taken more of a hands-on, more, I don't want, maybe the word is invasive approach to being more involved than they were prior. I'm not quite sure. I think that they're receiving more community scrutiny. I know that some school board members have shared with me that they know that they have taken criticism for being perceived as being a rubber stamp board. Mm-hmm. And so they are now asking more questions, and they are taking more of a watchdog approach with my leadership versus what they did in the past. I don't think that's fair. I've never had the opportunity to tell them or the community that's not fair. But it doesn't feel fair. So thank you for the opportunity for me to say it on the record.
Okay, and I think I noticed that somewhat in this police report here, where it's like referencing you as the current superintendent. Is that something along those lines?
I have no idea what you just said.
Sure, I'll back that up.
The current superintendent.
So they reference Mr. Ertl as the superintendent, and they say you as the current superintendent, right? As if current is something less than, you know, what
I understand now.
Right? Is that along those same lines, that perception?
I'll object to the form, but go ahead and answer if you can.
No, I don't think so. I think there's a bright line. I think people were recognizing how Dr. Ertl was able to lead and maybe didn't have as much oversight is different than what Damon Means is operating under and has more public and board scrutiny.
Okay, and is that just because of the way things were handled, I'm going to use the passive voice here, under Mr. Ertl or Dr. Ertl, or for other reasons?
When you know Mr. Cross, please let me know. Okay. I don't know why this is happening to me.
I understand. Okay.
I have no idea. I don't know what the difference between Dr. Ertl and I are. If you know, I would love to know.
Window to your world, right?
Yes.
Whew. That'd be a good window.
Okay, and nobody said anything?
As to why this is happening?
Right.
Why I'm maybe the leadership environment's different? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good question. That's insightful. I've had some school board members share with me that they feel that they were burned and that they should have asked more questions and that they're recalibrating. I think some people are regretting that they didn't ask some of the questions that they should have. I think those are some of the feedback I've received.
Okay.
I think people have shared that I want to say this very clearly, that they gave my predecessor more latitude than they probably should have. Mm-hmm. And so subsequently, without saying it to me, they said, so we're going to take some of that latitude back. Okay. And so I don't know how we can have that conversation later in terms of how fair that is, but that latitude has been taken back. And so how the board behaves in the boardroom and how they individually behave and how they talk to community members has, I believe, made my terrain as superintendent that much more difficult.
Okay.
than my predecessor.
Okay, and do you know who Steve Doman is?
Mr. Steve Doman is a past school board member and was school board president up until, I believe, May of 2022.
Okay, and that would include when the Fox 6 public records request happened, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and do you know Eric Jessup Anger?
I do know Eric.
Sure will.
Eric, his name is Dr. Eric Jessup, Jessup hyphen Anger, Anger.
And so
I know him.
Okay, how do you know him?
He's on the school board. He's currently now the school board president.
Okay, so Mr. Doman, past president, Dr. Jessup Anger, current president, right?
Yes.
Okay. As their, and you were superintendent during both of those presidencies, right?
Yes.
I'm going to object to the form, but go ahead and answer.
Yes.
Okay. Has there been any, because we've had a lot of talk here about sort of the limitations and let's say the reaction that has affected you because of perception adversely. Okay. I was expecting an objection, sorry. So you were affected adversely, so I'm going to use your terminology here, based on the perception of conduct for Mr. Ertl. That's fair to say?
No, that's not fair to say.
Okay. Well, because I don't want to mix up your language, but I want to get back to the concept that we were talking about here, that there is a difference in treatment between you by the board and Mr. Ertl, right?
They are the latitude that Dr. Ertl had versus what I have is different. I don't believe it's in response to behavior of Dr. Ertl. I believe it's more a condition of the reflection of the board and the reaction that they have received in the community, and that they are uncomfortable being perceived as a rubber stamp board, and they are uncomfortable with the perception that they have not provided greater oversight to the school system.
So I just want,
but I don't want to say that that is a condition of behaviors from Dr. Ertl. I think it's more self-reflective of the board itself.
I understand that. So I'm going to try to package that whole answer and just refer to that as the attitude, okay?
Sure.
And is it fair to say that the board's attitude has changed from the presidency of Mr. Doman to the presidency of Mr. Eric Jessup Anger?
No.
Okay, why not?
I think that behavior, the attitude, as you've coined it, is fairly consistent. There was a line that a very involved, supportive school board member would use consistently during my first year. That board member would say, "We will trust but verify." So they used that old Ronald Reagan quote. And I shared with that board member that by using that line publicly at board meetings, it engendered people to believe that maybe they shouldn't trust and that they should just focus on verifying.
Okay.
I know that I believe, I'll put it this way, I believe that statement and other statements were coming from a positive, good place, but it did create, to use your terminology again, an attitude.
Okay, and that was board member Fraley who made that comment?
Leanne, Leighanne, Fraley, I believe it's spelled Fraley. Leanne Fraley has made that comment in the past, yes.
Okay, and did that make you uncomfortable to have you be compared to the Soviet Union?
I'm going to object to the form of the question, but you can answer subject to that, unless you want to withdraw it.
I'm going to decline,
I'll withdraw.
although I would love to answer as a social studies teacher.
Okay.
Take my shoe off and bang the table, I guess.
All right. And I just want to give, I mean, was there anything else that you had wanted to include on that subject of attitude particularly?
I think I am following your logic.
You are.
It does. I appreciate the line of questioning, and I hope I've been clear in my responses. I hope it sets the stage for
It absolutely
discussions.
does. I just wanted to make sure
No,
that you
I'm
had
fine.
that opportunity. Okay.
Yes, sir.
3.
And this will be 3, please. Okay. Have you seen this document before?
I have. It's our board bylaws.
Okay. And what does the bylaws mean to you?
So the bylaws are, in essence, the bylaws in which the school board operates among themselves.
Okay. And then at the bottom of that page is a section marked 0132 Executive. Do you see that?
Yes, sir. I do see it. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. And so that says that the board is going to select the superintendent according to statutes, correct?
Yes, sir. And it refers to Wisconsin Statutes 118. Unlike a lawyer, the school law training that I've received really is primarily located in knowing the statutes and the Chapter 118. So yes, Chapter 118.24 references this selection process.
Okay. And then there's powers that the board has that they delegate to you here. Isn't that what's happening?
Yes.
Okay. And what are those powers?
Under bylaw 10132.2, the board shall delegate to the superintendent the function of specifying required actions and designing the detailed arrangements under which the district will be operated. These detailed arrangements shall constitute the administrative procedures governing the schools, which are not inconsistent with statutes or regulations of the Department of Public Instruction or the policies of this board.
Okay, so that's pretty broad. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then I'll take you to the penultimate paragraph here, and that's the superintendent shall be delegated the authority to take necessary action in circumstances not provided for in board policy. Did I read that part right?
You did, sir.
Okay, and is that the practice at Wauwatosa?
Let me read that again. The superintendent shall be delegated the authority to take action, necessary action, in circumstances not provided for in board policy, provided that such action shall not be reported to the board, provided that such action shall be reported to the board at the next meeting following such action.
Well, what does that mean to you?
What that means to me is that there's a lot of broad authority for a superintendent to act and lead if necessary.
Okay. I'm going to hand this to you. Here's a clip if you need one. This is 3 pages in total. And I'm sorry for the watermark there, but that should be 3, please.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's 4 right here. 4.
Days of the week and numbers out. Okay.
4.
All right. Do you recognize this document?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay. What is this document?
The document is titled 1210 Board-Superintendent Relationship.
Okay. That's the title of it. What does this document do, if you know?
It's a policy. It's the title of it is Policy 1210. It was adopted July 13th, 2009. It looks like it was revised slightly about 4 months later in October of 2009.
Okay. And as superintendent, does this policy give you any particular powers or authority?
In my prior 2 school districts, this was the roadmap, Mr. Cross, to the relationship between the school board and myself.
Okay. So let's, I think I got the distinction here, but let's at least go through this and and be clear on what the policy actually is, okay?
Okay.
So I read here, it says to build and maintain productive and effective relationships between the board and the superintendent and to develop an excellent educational program. Both the board and the superintendent will maintain a system of communication and interaction that builds upon mutual respect and trust. Did I read that part right?
You did, sir.
Okay. Is that an accurate representation of what's going on?
I'm going to object to the form. It's vague. It's overly broad. To the answer to the best of your ability.
I can't answer that question
Okay.
because of the broadness of it.
Okay. So, is that a fair and accurate representation of the board-superintendent relationship since your tenure as superintendent of Wauwatosa?
Same objections. Subject to that, you may answer.
I would say that individually I have enjoyed working with the 9 board members that I've worked with since being in the district. We have a 7-member board. I've been in the district for almost 2 years now.
Okay.
So you do the math. I mean, so I've worked with 9 board members in less than 2 years. So that's quite a turnover. What I would say is that individually, I have enjoyed working with all of our board members. I think the board as a body has been really hard to navigate and to work.
Okay.
Their working relationship has made the work that the board superintendent has to do that much more difficult.
When was the last time you reviewed this document?
I don't think I've ever reviewed this document with the board.
Okay, how about on your own?
It's been a while.
Okay. So let's go down to the second section here. It starts, the board's primary connection to the operation of the district is the superintendent. Did I read that right?
Which part are you?
That's above a unity of control?
Yes, sir, I see it.
Okay.
Yes.
And then it says, only decisions of the board acting as an entity are binding on the superintendent. Did I read that right?
You did.
Is that an accurate representation of how the school board acts during your time as superintendent?
I'm going to object to the form of the question, overly broad and vague. Subject to that, you may answer.
I would say that this is a difficult line to enact. The board president tends to have more contact with the superintendent. I wouldn't say they have more influence, but they have more contact and discussions with the school superintendent. So I don't think they're making decisions. I don't think a school board, unless the policy dictates that the school board president can make decisions, the school board president at times may have more information initially than other school board members, but eventually all school board members get the same information. That's the way I like to operate, at least, as much as possible.
So, and I just want to be clear and understand that you're saying that there are communications between you and the school board president, but that eventually the essence of those communications are shared with the rest of the board.
Eventually, yes.
How do you know that that happens?
Whatever I control in terms of those communications, eventually I share it with the entire board.
Okay.
If there are certain issues or information that is shared that the board president needs to share, then eventually that's the role of the board president to share.
Okay. Now, and is that, would you always share that information with the rest of the board?
When it's under my control and my decisions, yes.
Okay. And then when you share that information, do you tell the rest of the board who that information is coming from?
Check to the form.
I don't understand the question.
Sure. So if you're sharing the gist of your conversations with the school board president, are you telling the other school board members that what you're sharing with them is coming from the school board president?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I use a line in my communications where I will say a school board member has made a request, or a school board member. I don't point out the school board president, because the school board president's no more important or has more authority than any other school board member.
Okay. Is there ever a time when members of the board ask you to do something, and then when you tell the rest of the board, you don't tell them that a school board member has asked you to do it?
If I'm requested to do something or to share certain information, if it's necessary or appropriate, I will share which board member has asked me to share information or to pursue something. But I try not to say school board member X asked me to do something, so I'm doing it.
Why not?
Because all 7 board members are equally duly elected and granted the authority to serve as board members.
Okay. How do the other school board members know that the information that you're conveying to them is coming from the school board president, for example, and not the district?
Check to the form. Foundation calls for speculation. Subject to that, you may answer.
I'm not quite sure which decisions you're speaking of.
Sure. So we've just gone through a bunch of examples where you say that you you have conversations with the school board president, and then subsequent to that, whatever decision is made there, you then inform the rest of the board of those conversations, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then you also said, and it seemed to me that it was on a case-by-case basis, that you inform the rest of the school board whether or not where the origin of that discussion came from. Correct?
When it's appropriate, yes, I will share the origin of the conversation.
Exactly. Okay. So you are the one who knows whether or not it's appropriate, correct?
I'm the arbiter of that decision, yes.
Okay. So keeping with that in mind, how are the other school board members who are not the president supposed to know that the information that you're conveying to them is coming from the school board president as opposed to the school district?
They may not know at times.
Okay. Does that factor in on your decision on whether or not to tell other school board members where that information came from?
Check to the form. You can answer if you understand it.
I don't understand.
What about it don't you understand?
I don't understand the foundation of the question.
Okay. Do you know what foundation means?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's go on here to the bottom of that page, Exhibit 4 again. And there's, under A, it says 1. Okay? Mm-hmm. Decisions or instruction of individual board members, officers, or committees are not binding on the superintendent, except in rare instances where the board has specifically delegated such authority. Did I read that right?
You did.
Okay. Since your tenure as superintendent, is that the policy and practice of the Wauwatosa School Board?
I would say that there isn't any. I'm just reading. If I may just read it again.
Please.
No, I would say the board, there have been various board members who have insisted on certain things to happen and have made those desires known to me.
Okay. How did that happen? How do they communicate those desires?
They're emailing me. They call me. There's requests for certain things to happen certain ways.
Okay. And it says here that you don't have to, if you get a request from an individual board member, it's up to you whether or not you follow it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what the practice is.
In an effort to maintain harmony with the school board, I try to accommodate as many requests as possible.
Okay. And the school board's also responsible for renewing your contract, correct?
I serve at the pleasure of the school board. So as you asked a question earlier around Ms. Zelazowski's employment and my influence over it, the school board has the same influence over my employment.
Okay. And is it fair to say that you have that in mind when you make decisions on whether or not you fulfill individual board member requests?
I think that is a challenge that every superintendent has when receiving questions from school board members.
Okay. And based on your knowledge and experience with Dr. Jessup Anger, do you believe he knows that?
Objection, form foundation. Subject to that. If you know, answer.
Dr. Jessup Anger is a very learned man and has read policies, but I would never presume to know what he knows.
Okay. Now, I'm going to go down to section B that's on the next page here. It says accountability of the superintendent.
Okay.
Okay, it says the board will not give instructions to persons who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent. Did I read that right?
You have.
Okay. Is that the practice of the board?
Objection, overly broad. Subject to that, you can answer.
No, that has not been the practice of this current board.
Okay. What subordinates of yours are you aware of who have been given direct instructions by the board?
Objection, overly broad, vague. Subject to that, you can answer.
I know that our our chief of pupil and family supports, Mr. Luke Pinion, has received emails from a board member. I wouldn't use the words. It would probably be more indirectly, I wouldn't call it giving instructions, but making requests of information or action.
What board member was that?
I don't feel comfortable sharing. Do I have to answer?
You do have to answer as long as the question is going to remain on the record. Can I just get a clarification on how this relates in any way to the lawsuit? It may, but it seems like a little bit of a fishing expedition for board squabbles, and I don't want to go there.
No, I understand. I think what we're talking about here, just so I can get that on the record, I think there's a lot on especially human growth and development in terms of how the instructions are being put directly to either Mr. Means or Dr. Marble, for example.
Or
So,
Dr. Who.
Marble, for example. Is it Marbles?
It's Marble.
Marble, okay.
Okay, so this question relates to a communication regarding human growth and development.
And the way that the human growth, the data scrubbing is handled.
Okay, to the extent it relates to that, and I'm not sure what you're talking about does relate to that. If it doesn't, could you tell him that the situation, answer his question as to whether what you were referring to has anything to do with the human growth and development issues?
It did not.
Okay.
Okay, what issue did it have to deal with?
There was a school board member who made certain requests of our chief of pupil and family supports, Mr. Luke Pinion. Pinion. Pinion.
What was the nature of the request?
I can't remember the details of the request, but I know that he has received at least 2 different emails from a school board member just making requests around the issues of school safety, and can't remember the other topic.
When did these requests happen?
This school year.
Okay. And how do you know that they're not related to the issue that we just described?
Of human growth and development? Is that the issue you're speaking of? Because they were not.
Well, how do you know that?
Because Mr. Pinion came and shared with me what the requests were, and they had nothing to do with human growth and development.
Great. What were they about?
I don't remember.
I think he did, in fairness to the witness, he did relay one of the issues.
Right.
With school safety, I think was something he said.
Okay. What about school safety?
I don't recall the details.
Okay. Do you recall anything?
I recall a lot.
Okay. On this conversation here, right?
What part of the conversation?
We had school safety. Is there anything else you recall about?
I don't recall the other specific topic right now.
Do you recall anything else about that conversation with Mr. Pinion?
Well, there were, if you remember, I referenced at least 2.
Okay.
And I don't remember the other one.
Why did Mr. Pinion come to you at that time?
Because it's pretty jarring for my subordinates to get emails or calls from school board members.
Did you feel undermined at that time?
anytime that happens, I feel somewhat undermined.
Okay. And
Let me be very specific because I'm not being very clear, and I want the testimony to read when it's typed back, that transcription. Anytime the superintendent is not aware that a school board member is reaching out to your executive team, you do feel undermined.
okay. Was there any other times you felt undermined by the school board in your tenure as superintendent?
I'm going to object as overly broad and so far beyond the scope of what this lawsuit is about. I don't have any problem with you exploring anything related to this lawsuit, but this is really not an opportunity to talk about all of the woes of the problems and issues, and we're really going far afield. So I don't mean to, I don't believe in speaking objections. I truly don't, but we've got a limited time period here, and I would ask you to get to what we're here to talk about.
Well, I mean, one way to do that would just tell us who the board member is.
And he's not going to do that, you know, and it is solely for purposes wholly unrelated to this lawsuit. He's answered that it doesn't have anything to do with this lawsuit.
Okay. So all that aside, so are you refusing to answer that question?
Which question? Just so we have
To
a nice,
name
clear
who
record.
the person is who went to your direct subordinate and asked them to do some work for this.
The some work involves the two requests that have nothing to do with this lawsuit. Just so we're clear on what your question is.
I just heard that that's your opinion, but yes.
No, I just want a clear question, because if he's not going to answer it, and the court's going to have to rule on it later,
Right.
I would like a nice, clear question.
Okay. Are you able to read back the original question?
Was there any other times you felt undermined by the school board in your tenure as superintendent?
I don't think that's the question that he is refusing to answer.
Are you going to answer that question?
No, I haven't felt undermined by the school board in any other instances.
Okay. What school board member gave instructions to your direct subordinate twice that you're aware of?
Check to the Foreman Foundation. Subject to that, you may answer.
I feel uncomfortable responding to that question because it's not relevant to what we're discussing here today.
I understand. And so, unfortunately, you don't get to make that decision. So I'm going to have to ask you, are you refusing to answer that question?
Out of respect for that board member, yes.
Okay.
And I would like to interpose a question. Were those the requests that had nothing to do with the lawsuit or any of the allegations in the lawsuit?
Had nothing to do with the lawsuit.
I just wanted that nice and clear on the record.
Okay. No, you're fine. I just mixed up. Okay. So let's just go back to D. It says delegation of board authority. I'm going to read this out here. It says number 2, the authority of the superintendent to act and to establish administrative procedures begins where policy statements of the board end. The board will monitor the superintendent's compliance with policy. Did I read that part right?
Yes.
Okay. And is that an accurate reading of the policy with regard to the delineation between day-to-day matters and policy matters?
I would not consider D section 2 of policy 1210 as the delineation between board and superintendent operation authority.
Okay.
The way I read 1210 subsection D subsection 2 is to say that the authority of the superintendent is to establish how the policies are going to be enacted, if you will.
Okay, so let's look at section 5 there. And it says, should the superintendent or his or her designee consider it unwise or impractical to comply with an explicit board policy, the superintendent will inform the board of the decision. The board will decide whether such judgment was warranted. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Have you ever done that?
No. I don't recall
Okay.
ever not following an explicit board policy, because that's what that number 5 is suggesting.
Okay. And then to be clear, does that mean to you that anytime the board votes, and the majority of the board votes on something, that then you are required to do that or to inform them under this policy?
No, that's not how I read it. That's not how I read subsection D, subsection 5 of policy 1210 at all. It says, should the superintendent or his or her designee consider it unwise or impractical to comply with an explicit board policy, the superintendent will inform the board of the decision. The board will decide whether such judgment was warranted. So in other words, if there's a policy 6320 that says you're supposed to get board authority to purchase anything over $20,000, the way I read subsection D5 is if the superintendent or the designee said, we're gonna spend $40,000 and we're not gonna tell the board about it, that's not following policy.
Okay. Okay. I guess, where are we now? We can go into human...
I don't normally have lunch because I'm operating the district, so
I don't either.
Let's go off the record.
We are off the record at 11:40 a.m. This is the end of media unit number 2.